Hello, thank you for coming. My name is Moto. I run a literary journal called Monkey with Ted Goosen here and the other editor, Meg Taylor, who lives in Pittsburgh. We focus on contemporary Japanese writing, but we also publish modern classic and also some pieces by English-speaking writers. And I also, in Japan, I run a Japanese language literary journal, which is called also Monkey. So two monkeys overlap with each other partly, and to give you a flavor of the two magazines, I'm going to read a very short piece, which is both in the latest issue of the Japanese magazine and the English magazine. This was a poem written in response to a question. We sent one question to a number of poets, and the question was, what kind of person would you like to be when you grow old? So this poem by Sawako Nakayasu was written in that question in mind. Could you hold it?
Yes, I will.
It's called And as a Glass of Water, Sawako Nakayasu. コップ一杯の水としてのあり、Sawako Nakayasu. They asked, and I say no, because I figure they are unlikely to accept my answer anyway, but they insisted on an answer, so I say, fine, I tell you. お答えくださいって言われて、どうせ私の答えは受け入れられないだろうと思ったから答えませんって言ったら、いや、そこをなんとかって言うんで分かりました、答えます。I tell you that when I grow very old, I would like to become a glass of water. それじゃあですね、すごく年を取ったらコップ一杯の水になりたいですって言ったら No, no, you must continue to be human. いや、人間のままでやってくださいって言われて See, I told you I didn't want to answer. ほら、やっぱりだから嫌だって言ったんですって言ったら No, please, you must continue to be human. いや、お願いしますよ、人間のままでやってくださいって言うんで But why? なんでですかって聞いたら Because you are one now. 今のあなたが人間だからって言うんで All the more in my old age, I would like to be a glass of water. I make such a massive glass of water, don't you think? だからこそ置いたらコップ一杯の水になりたいんじゃありませんか。私きっとすごくいい感じの水になれると思うんですよ。そう思いませんか？ So useful, so desired. すごく役に立つ人に望まれる水。No, no, you cannot be a glass of water. いや、コップ一杯の水ってのはダメなんですってんで Fine then, I'll be an ant. わかりました。じゃあアリになります。No, you cannot be an ant. いえ、アリはダメです。For the same reason I imagine. 多分同じ理由なんでしょうね。Yes, そうです。Please, お願いしますよ。Do continue to be human. とにかく人間のままでいていただかないと。But why won't you even give me a chance? だってなんでですか？チャンスくらいくれたっていいじゃないですか。In fact, through that, I'll be an ant, and that ant will be a glass of water. I lost my praise. そんなに言うなら一度こうします。私、アリになります。で、そのアリはコップ一杯の水なんです。I do not understand what you mean. わかりませんね、どういうことか。Here's what you can do with my old age. だからですね、私の老いをこうしてもらえばいいんです。Swirl it first to release the aroma. まず、ビュンビュン振り回して香りを発散させるわけです。I'm a well-tempered ant, a nicely adjusted glass of water. 私、バランスの取れたアリ、よく調整された平均率的な水なんです。Breathe it in, my molecules of ant scent. で、ぐっと吸い込んでもらいます。アリの香りの分子を吸い込むわけです。Tip it to the left, tip it to the right. Watch the contents switch to the head, to the tail, to the back again.To the head. そして左に傾けて右に傾けて中身がシャシャッと頭に上がって尾っぽに下がってまた頭に上がるのを眺めてもらいます。Contemplate my black translucency, the sleek curve of exoskeleton that fits nicely in your hand, and imagine how nourishing this universal elixir of ant. この私の黒い透明性をですね、じっくり味わっていただくんです。外骨格の滑らかなカーブが手にしっくりと馴染むと思うんです。想像してみてください。それがどれだけ需要に満ちたものか。この万能あり霊薬が Daily, everyday, forever, moreover 一日一日毎日毎日永遠無限とこしえにI am delighted to age so beautifully into this ant, this glass of water. ああ、こうやっていい感じに年取れて本当によかった。この割にこのコップ一杯の水になれて I am grateful. ありがたいです。I am joyful. 嬉しいです。I am overflowing with vigorous survival. 活力、勢力、サバイバルパワーみなぎってます。Thank you, ant. ありがとう、アリ。Thank you, water. ありがとう、水。Our relationship is both banal and extraordinary. 私たちの関係は平凡かつ異例なものなんです。I am an ant. 私はI am a glass of water. 私はコップ一杯の水。plus a change, plus a change. Same as it ever was. 何も変わりません。The question is no longer to drink or not to drink. 問題はもはや飲むべきか飲まざるべきかではなく、the wind outside is punishing, and yet look at you now, holding me so tenderly. 外では身を切る風なのに、ほらあなた、私をそっと優しく抱えてくれて、I knew it would be easier than you could ever know to age so nicely into this ant that is a glass of water. 分かってたんです。実はすっごく簡単なんだって。いい感じに老いるって。このコップ一杯の水であるアリになるなんてわけないんです。It is what it is, as they say into their covered mouths. そういうもんだよってみんなこそっと言ってるじゃないですか。Thank you.
That was Motoyuki Shibata. We call him Moto. So here we are to talk with Hiromi Kawakami. And she's been a contributor to Monkey, before that Monkey Business, from our very beginning. This collection, which we're going to read from, People from My Neighborhood, was featured in the first issue, and we have she has contributed to the Japanese language Monkey every issue since then, and we published all of those in the English Monkey in my translation. So, and she's still writing. This is not a complete version because there can't be a complete version until she stops, and she hasn't stopped yet.
4月に締め切りがあります。帰ったら。
次の締め切りが。
My next deadline is in April.
It's already April.
So maybe we should introduce ourselves. I'm Ted Goosen. I live in Toronto. I until recently taught at York University. I recently retired. And Moto and I have been collaborating on Monkey Business and now Monkey for about 15 years. And yeah, and I've enjoyed translating and reading Hiromi intensely. She's my favorite writer at this moment. So I'm very, very lucky to be able to translate her stuff. And yeah, so let me pass it over to Hiromi and she can introduce herself.
Hello, I'm very happy to meet you and come to New York. 川上ひろみと言います。30年、小説を書き始めて30年経ちました。私はいろいろな小説を書いていて、いろいろな小説を書いてるんです。短編も書くし、長編も書きます。それからエッセイも書くし、不思議な日記も書いています。ですから川上ひろみはどんな小説を書く小説家って聞かれるとすごく難しいんですね。非常に幻想的な、不思議な小説を書く時もありますし、非常にリアルな小説を書く時もありますが、どうしてもリアルの中にも幻想味が混じる、そういう小説家だと思います。
So I've been writing for about 30 years now, and I write all kinds of stories in many different genres. I write short stories, I write novels, I write essays, sometimes I write a strange sort of diary. And so it's hard for me to try to describe what my characteristics are as a writer. I write a lot of fantastical stories, but I also write stories that are based in realism. But I think within that realistic vein, there's always a sense of strangeness that creeps in, whatever I'm writing.
So what we're going to do today is I'll have a conversation with Hiromi, and then after that we will read from one of the short stories. They're very short, from People from My Neighborhood, and in both English and Japanese, and then we'll entertain your questions. Okay. So I'll ask first of all, Hiromi. First of all, I love reading your stuff. You know that.
Thank you.
And I especially enjoy every year I have a chance to translate these stories from People from My Neighborhood, and they're still continuing. They haven't been finished. So but I've often wondered. I look forward to it each year. But how about you? Why and how do you continue to serialize this collection?
私にもわからないですね。
I don't know about the answer to that either.
ただ締め切りがあるのは大事です。
But it's important to have deadlines.
でも書けなくなったことは幸い今まで一度もない。それは自分でも不思議です。なんていうかあんまり自分のお話をすごいと思ってないからかもしれません。
Yeah, but one thing I can say is that I've never not been able to write, and actually that is surprising, actually. And maybe that's because I never think of my stories as anything special.
自分の話は好きなんですけれども、自分がすごく素晴らしい価値のあるものだっていうふうに思ってしまうと書けなくなる気がしますね。
And of course, I like the stories that I write. I think they're nice, but I think as soon as I start thinking that they have some kind of great value, I probably won't be able to write anymore.
So this collection has recurring characters. You meet the characters toward the beginning, and then they reappear, and then they reappear again. And since it's been 15 years since you started writing these, I'm curious to know, have they changed? For example, Kanae-chan. There's a character named Kanae who appears and reappears. A very interesting character. She's a nasty little kid. She becomes a juvenile delinquent, and then she becomes a fashion designer who's been to Paris. She's quite a character. But I'm wondering, does your feeling about Kanae-chan change, or does she change as you think about how to present her?
かなえが好きなの。
I like kind of,
Do you like かなえ especially?
Not when she's mean. She's often very, very mean. But I also like her because she's so independent. この辺りの人たちの一つ一つのお話はすごく短いんです。ですから例えばかなえという女の子が出てきても本当にそのかなえについての説明は4行ぐらいしかありません。ですから最初にかなえを書いた時私はかなえがどんな女の子だかあんまり知らなかった。ですから15年の間にもうちょっと増えて全部で今では100行ぐらいあるかもしれません。ですから変化したというよりもかなえが膨らんでいった。かなえの中に私がどんどん入っていって私がかなえを知ったっていうことになりますね。
So the stories and people from my neighborhood, they're very short, and the description of each of these characters are maybe 4 lines long at best. And so there's a girl named Kanae, and when I first started writing about this girl, I didn't know that much about her, and so I've been writing about her for over about 15 years, and now maybe there are about 100 lines about Kanae, and of course she has changed. But maybe rather than saying she's changed, she's expanded, and I've entered into that character, and I've gotten to know her better.
で一つちょっと謝らなきゃならないことがあるんですけどこれ私さっきどうして長く書き続けられるかっていうのを少しかっこよく言いましたけど実は自分が忘れっぽいから書き続けられるっていうこともあるんです。
And so I actually want to clarify myself and apologize for what I said earlier when Ted asked me, how can I keep writing about this, for a long time. I said something very lofty, but actually I think it's because I'm very good at forgetting.
自分がちょっと違うなって思うものを書いてもそれをずっと反省していると書き続けるのは難しいんですね。でも前に書いたものはもう過去のもの、次に行こうっていうふうにすぐ思えるタイプです。
Yeah, so I think if I had a better memory and I always thought about what I wrote in the past and I regretted things or I want to rewrite something, then I probably couldn't keep on writing. But because I'm able to think of my past writing as something that's already done, that's finished, then I can look forward and continue writing.
いい加減に書いているつもりはないんですけど、この本に関してはまだテッドにも言ってなかったことがあるんですよ。
So it's not that I'm not serious about this serialization, but there's something I haven't told you yet, Ted.
後で読む、短いお話は八郎版というお話です。八郎という子供が出てきます。
Yeah. Yeah, so the story that I'm about to read is titled Hachiro's Lottery.
でも15年間書き続けていて、次に八郎のことを書こうと思った時に、八郎ではなく六郎って書いちゃったんです。
But in the 15 years that I've been writing this, instead of writing Hachiro, I accidentally wrote Rokuro, since it's number 6 instead of 8.
で、翻訳された時、なぜ八郎と六郎は同じ人のはずなのになんで名前が変わったんだろうって言っているけれど、ちょっと違う八郎なのかしらと翻訳者たちが言っているとエージェントが言ってたので、私もそれでいいかなってそのようにしちゃいました。
So I didn't realize that I changed the name, but in the process of translation, I heard the agent saying that the translators were wondering what was the meaning behind this transformation of the name, but then I thought, oh, maybe I'll just let it be. I won't explain.
So to give you a sense of the book, it's hard to give you a sense of this book because it goes all over the place. It goes into the past. It goes into something that's totally fictional. It surprises you, and it's that surprising part of this collection that I enjoy so much. And yet, at the same time, it's set in a particular community. Kono atari no hitotachi, the people from my neighborhood. It's a real neighborhood, and you get to know them, and you get to know the neighborhood a little bit. It's a little bit like Sherwood Anderson wrote Winesburg, Ohio. You know that collection? It's a little bit like Winesburg, Ohio on acid, right? It's very, very zany. This is a word we talked about yesterday. It's very, very zany. It's a zany collection.
And it's quite it's in a way pretty similar to what's the title of Sandra Cisneros' first book?
House on Mango Street.
The House on Mango Street. That's could be closer to the book because it's also told by a little girl, just like people from the neighborhood.
But this little girl, at some point in the narrative, becomes an old woman. Talking to other old women who you've met before as children, and then it may jump back again, so that you're back with them as children. So it's not a linear work, right? It's very patsu-patsu. It goes all over the place, and it's wonderful. And you get attached to, like we're talking about Kanai-chan. You have an affinity. Well, like I said, I dislike her sometimes, right? But you do get to know her. And so as she reappears, and she may not appear for 4 or 5 stories, and then she'll reappear. Oh, there's Kanai-chan again. And so again, you can't predict very much, nor do the stories follow the rules of physics. In time and space, they jump all over the place. So it's to use that word, it is certainly zany. And I wonder, when you write these stories, do you go? When I translate them, I go into that space, right? It's a space that I've been to many times because I've translated these stories over a long period of time. So one of the reasons why I enjoy translating them is I return to this very unique space. And I'm wondering, when you're writing, do you have the same type of experience?
この本に関しては書き始めるとすぐにその世界に行きます。
So, with regards to writing these stories in particular, I am able to jump straight into that world when I'm writing.
小説によってはその世界にあまり行きたくない小説もあるんですね、自分の書いていても。
So depending on what novels I'm writing, sometimes I really don't want to go into that space.
なんていうか、好き嫌いではなく、そこに行くと辛いっていうような内容の小説もあるので、そういう時です。
And it's not a matter of like or dislike, but sometimes it's really hard to go into that space.
でもなぜそういう小説を書くかっていうと、やっぱり書かなければならないっていう気持ちが自分の中にあるからだとは思うんですね。
So why do I go in there? I think it's because there's some kind of drive that I feel that I need to write these stories.
でもこの辺りの人たちは私が積極的にそこに住みたいと思う場所です。
But with people from my neighborhood, I really want to live there.
Why?
いや、私はそれっ ぽいので、実はあの中には宇宙がいくつかあって、八郎が八郎の宇宙と八郎が六郎の宇宙が両方並んでるんですよ。だから実はあれは私の物忘れではなく、多元宇宙、平行宇宙の話、そういうところに住めればいいなって思いますよ。
I guess I like that there are multiple universes within the book. There's a world where Hachiro is Hachiro, and there's a universe where Hachiro is Rokuro. And so it's kind of a parallel universe for me, and it's kind of an ideal space that I want to inhabit.
いや、地球今いろんな大変なことになってて、ここだけにしかいられないって思うととっても閉塞的な気持ちになりますけど、違う地球があるかもしれないって思いたいじゃないですか。
Yeah, so there's a lot going on in the world right now, and to think that there's only one Earth, for me feels very restrictive, very confined. So I like to imagine that there are multiple Earths that we could live in.
So Hiromi has written many books, and a number have been translated into English. One of my favorites is translated by Allison Markham Powell. It's called Strange Weather in Tokyo in English. In Japanese, it's called Sensei no Kaban, or the briefcase of Sensei. And I love that work. But for today, I thought, because I've translated 3 books in a row by her now, that I would focus on those books that I've translated, because I know them best. And I still have questions. I have questions about them. The next work that I'd like to talk about is Dragon Palace. Dragon Palace is a collection that was put together over 20 years ago, just about 20 years ago. I've been reading it. I read it when it came out, and then I kept going back to it because I liked it so much. And then I published a couple of those stories in Monkey Business, and then Monkey. And now we published it as a book, as part of the Monkey, what do we call it? The Monkey imprint? The Monkey imprint. With Stonebridge Press in San Francisco. It's a different kind of collection, but it's also zany, a little bit, what's the word? There are characters in it who like there's a guy who may be an octopus, there is a couple who are hundreds of years old, there's an old man who's a fox spirit, he's also old, and his keeper falls in love with him, and it goes on and on like that. There are many different stories, 8 stories I think altogether, and so I'm interested in the time, because you wrote it some time ago when you were younger. What was it like to write that collection?
その時はね、はっきり分かっていませんでした、正直に言うと。ただ今振り返るとこうだったのかなって思うことがあります。
At the time, I'm not sure that I was quite aware of what I was writing or how I was feeling while writing it. Of course, now that I reflect back, I can imagine, oh, maybe that's what I was feeling back then.
この話、ドラゴンパレスの中の短編はちょっとそのおとぎ話のような、寓話のようなそういう形をとっているんですね。で、その、形だからこそ書けたものがあったんだと今になって思います。ではそれは何が書けたかというと、例えば当時女性が置かれていた位置に対する疑問、それから人間関係、当時の社会に対する疑問でもその当時に対する社会や女性の位置への疑問は今もずっと続いているもので、今書くとしたらもう少しリアリスティックな書き方ができるんですけれども、当時はそういう書き方ができるほどの成熟が日本の社会にはなかったような気がするんですね。もう女性がものを書いているっていうだけで色眼鏡で見られていた、そういう時代が終わろうとしている時代だったんです。
So the collection of stories in Dragon Palace, they're drawn from fairy tales, allegories, and the stories themselves take that shape, borrow from that shape, to express what I wanted to express. And I think at that time it needed that. and I was, asking myself all kinds of questions like the position of women, also social expectations. There's a lot of critique and questioning of those sorts of things. But I couldn't write them realistically. I needed that kind of fantasy element to it. I think of course, all of those social questions linger today, and I'm still thinking about them. And if I were to write them now, I would probably write in a more realistic way. But at the time, I think Japanese society hadn't maybe progressed with regard to those questions. Just by the fact that I was a woman writing at the time, they would be read. My stories would be read in a certain way, and I think I had to be conscious of writing in a certain way because of that.
ただ今私がそういうことを書くとしたらもしかするとやはり偶話的な書き方をするかもしれません。今日本にはたくさんの作家がいて男性も女性もそういう問題をいろいろな形で書いてます。でリアリスティックに書く、川上美恵子さんのような人もいれば、じゃあ自分はどう書くかというと、私はやっぱり物語に笑いというものがすごく必要なんです。笑いっていうものが介在して、人に何かが届きやすくなるユーモアっていうのかな、そういう何でしたっけ、さっきゼイニーなものを含む小説をずっと書いていきたいと思っているので、今書いても同じ形になるかもしれません。
But really thinking about it again, if I were to write them now, I could still write in this allegorical mode. Of course, now both male and female writers in Japan are, making social critiques and thinking about, these questions and expressing them in writing. And there are wonderful authors. For example, Mieko Kawakami, the other Kawakami, she writes in a more realistic mode. For me, I think humor is a really important element. I use humor to kind of get the message across to the readers, maybe more to reach people more easily. So the zany element that you both mentioned are really important, and I would like to continue keeping in that zany mode in my writings.
The last story in Dragon Palace is called a Seahorse, and it's not funny. In fact, it's very painful to see. This is a story of this seahorse is not a cute little seahorse. This is a more like a seal or something, but with fur, with hair, and swimming around in the ocean, and who was drawn to shore by the smell of a man. And so she approaches the man. She comes out of the ocean, approaches the man, and becomes his woman for a while, but then he has to pass her on to someone who he owes money to, and she's taken by another man, and then he passes her on, and she's passed around like that for quite a long time, and until finally she's almost forgotten what the ocean was like. And in her last relationship, now she's been unable to conceive a baby that lives until this last relationship, and then she has 3 children, and the youngest is a daughter. And the daughter is very much like her mother. And the daughter is the one who returns to the sea. And the mother follows her. And it's a very emotional, you almost want to weep when you see this scene of the mother following the daughter, excuse me, back to her ancestral home. So to me, that made me feel strongly, something about what you're talking about now.
I think so. もう少し喋りますか。それに会話について。私もどちらでも。
Yeah. I mean, the way she's treated brutally by men. The men abuse her, and the last man, and I'm wondering, perhaps the last husband. And she has these husbands over a century of time, right? Again, we're not dealing with linear time. But with the last husband, she conceives 3 children who live. And I wondered, why was it that she was never able to conceive until the very end? But this last husband seems to be, perhaps, somewhat like her. That they seem to share that genetically they seem to share enough so that she's able to bear his children. And he also understands when she needs to go back. And that's also a very emotional, very emotional moment when he drives her to the sea and she goes back. And you know, all the men before, all the husbands before have been told, never let her go back to the, never let her be near the sea, right? Keep her away from the sea, because you could lose her that way. And she's a mono, she's a possession, right, of these men, and they don't want to give up their possession. It's not that they care for her, but she satisfies them in some way. So I guess, yeah, is that true? Is the last husband different than the others?
多分そうです。
Probably.
昨日も話したんですけれど、ちょうどこの竜宮を書いている時、私は離婚をしようとしてまして、でその離婚についてのことをもちろん小説に書くつもりはなかったです。そういう今起こっている出来事をその時小説に書くのはすごく難しくて、多分それは10年後20年後に出てくるんですけれども、多分その時の自分があまりに苦しくて、この竜宮の中には結婚制度っていうものに関する憤りのようなものが今読むととっても濃くあるんですね。で最後の海馬は特にそれで、つまり自分の結婚が男から絶対に抑圧されたものだったとは言いません。うちの夫はそんな抑圧的な夫ではなかった。私はそれで、結局はその10年後ぐらい、十何年後にようやく離婚できたんですけど、そんなでも抑圧的な男性ではありませんでしたけれど、やはり、結婚制度という日本の、他の国は分かりませんけど、日本の社会の結婚制度というものの中には非常にもう構造的に女性を抑圧するものがある。反対に言うと男性も抑圧してるんですよね。ですからその最後の夫の前の夫たちは結婚制度というものに抑圧された結果、女性を抑圧しているっていうこともあると思うんです。ですけれども、一番最後の夫はそれでもそれを抑圧を跳ねのけようとしたけれども、でも反対に言うと、じゃあ女性がそんな抑圧にやすやすと屈しているかっていうとそうではなく、ある時はしたたかにその制度の中で、自由に振る舞うようにするし、それからそれを反対に楽しんでしまうこともするし、それだけれどもどうしてもそこにはいられなくて最後は海に帰っていくっていう、それは何か私にとっては一つの希望のような小説でした。
Okay, so when I was writing this short story collection already 20 years ago, I was going through a divorce, and I was going through so much, but I wasn't, I'm never able to write about what's happening to me at the moment. It takes me about 10 or 20 years for me to process what's happened, and maybe I can write about it retrospectively. But all the emotions, all the struggles, all of that, I think, did go into the feelings of the collection. And I think I was feeling a lot of anger towards the marriage system, especially, and I think that is manifested especially in the last scene. And I don't want to say that I was repressed by my husband in my former marriage, but it did take me 10 years to get a divorce, to finalize the divorce. And I do feel that there's a systemic oppression towards women in the Japanese marriage system, which also means that there's a repression towards the men as well. And so one could say that all the other husbands that appear in the story had been repressed, had internalized the repression of the marriage system, and then kind of took it out on the main character. And then the last husband perhaps tried to get away from that. And then of course the women who are trapped in these marriages, they don't just take everything just laying down. They of course struggle. Sometimes they enjoy, they can enjoy certain aspects of it. But there is this desire to get out, and I think that had to do with the return to the sea. And so that ending for me, there was a lot of hope.
Okay, then.
Wonderful interpretation.
Yeah, really. So let's turn now to the last of your works that I've translated, Sandome no Koi. It's called The Third Love in English, and it'll be coming out from Granta in about 2 months. So you aren't able to read it yet, but you will be soon. And to follow up on what you're talking about now, then you were talking about marriage and the marriage system, and this seems connected. You're talking about love and the nature of love and how it can trap women.
3度目の恋というのは、日本の古典である伊勢物語に、テーマに取った小説なんです。
Yeah, so this third love, this new novel that is being translated, is inspired by the Tales of Ise, which is a classic Japanese tale.
伊勢物語は、有名な日本で一番ではないけど非常に古くて今も読まれている源氏物語という小説に影響を与えたと言われている歌物語です。
So the tale of Ise is a very famous classic tale, and it's said to have inspired the tale of Genji, which is one of the best classics of Japanese literature.
で、源氏物語というのは光源氏という、一人の男がたくさんの女といろいろな種類の女と関係を持ちながら、その光源氏を描写するのではなく女たちを描写するためにトリックスターのような存在として光源氏がいるという小説です。
So with the tale of Genji, there's a hero, Hikaru Genji, the shining prince, and he has many different types of relationships with different women. But actually, he's like an empty cipher. It's a way for the storyteller to portray all the various women that existed at the time.
で、それは理屈としてはわかるんですが、読んでいるとどうしてもなんでこの源氏はこんな女にモテて女にひどいんだって怒る気持ちがどんどん湧いてくるわけですね。
And so it's easy to understand or think about the structure in that way, but it does make the reader frustrated why this person, Hikaru Genji, gets to get away with so many affairs and have relationship with different women.
で、その光源氏と非常にの元となった有原成平という実在の男について考えるときに、でも私が今現在生きている私が1000年以上前のその源氏物語、伊勢物語の舞台である社会について考えるのは何かもう文化が全く違うからちょっと無理がある。それでもうちょっと考えてみたいと思って小説を書きました。
Yeah, so Ariwara no Narihira, who's the hero of the tale of Ise, who became the model of Genji, when I tried to think about the story and the characters from today's perspective, from a contemporary point of view, which took place 1,000 years ago, the culture is so different, the expectations are so different. It's really hard to understand how things worked or to understand their, as human beings. So I tried to think of how I can not make this into a story to understand that world better.
ですからやっぱり私の中に非常に大きいテーマとしてあるのは結婚制度あるいは男女の関係ということなんですけれども、それを考えるためにはもうその社会における自分っていうの目で見ないとわからない。で、3度目の恋というのは現在の結婚しているカップルの女が、その結婚について苦しんでいると夢の中で江戸時代300年前の、娼婦の心の中に彼女が入り込む。で、いろいろ過ごしてみた。江戸時代は現代とは全く違う結婚制度や恋愛の関係があるけれども、これは時代の要請に従ったものだったなっていうのが分かる。そしてさらに1000年前の平安時代の有原の成平の妻の心の中に夢の中で入っていって、でなるほどこの社会での男女関係はこうなんだっていう、もう3層になっている全く違うけれどつながっている結婚という制度について、描写してみた、そういう小説です。
So I myself, I'm really interested in the marriage system. I'm interested in male-female relations. Those are the big themes that I think about when I'm writing. But I think it's really important to kind of go to be in that context, to think about these things critically. So when I was writing the novel, there's the present moment, there's a married couple and the woman is suffering in the marriage. And so in her suffering, she has dreams. And she goes back to the Edo period, 300 years ago. She enters into a courtesan's mind and thinks about the marriage system, the male-female relationships through her mind, and kind of understands a little bit more objectively, oh, okay, it's because of this social structures that, that women suffer and things. And then she goes back to the Heian period, 1,000 years. She inhabits the mind of Narihira's wife. And so she's kind of able to, by slipping into the past and these different social contexts, she's able to see these systemic oppressions or systems much more objectively and in a connected way as well.
皆さんがアメリカのその入植したての時代に戻る。そして今の自分の心でその時代の人間の心の中に入るっていうそういうだからそういう感じです。
Yeah, so maybe in the American context, the story would be kind of if you were to imagine the character going back into the colonial days and thinking about how the marriage system worked and drawing connections in that way, and then still with the contemporary consciousness.
So when I was first offered a chance to translate this book, I hadn't read it yet. So I read it, and I thought, oh shit, this is going to be tough, I mean, I really liked it, but I thought, how the heck can I translate this? It looked difficult, and it was difficult. It took me about a year, but I got so much from it, and what I took from it is not exactly fit with what you're saying. I also saw how you were able to bring out the strengths of the women of Edo or the women of Heian, and at the end, the main character is stronger. And I won't give away the ending, but it's connected to this idea of the third love. And I got this feeling that you have been able to offer to Japanese women an alternative to looking outside for models of strength, but to look back, to see strength, the possibility of augmenting a modern woman's personality or fate with those of women of the past. Is that also what you were doing?
はい、最初はそれは私も実は江戸時代平安時代のことはそんなに深くは知らなかったんです。でもちょうどその、平安時代の日本の古い文献を集めている資料館がありまして、そこで勉強することができました。でそれでいろいろなことを知って、かえって自分もびっくりしました。
Yes, actually, when I first started this project, it's not that I was a specialist of Edo and Heian periods. There was so much that I had that I could learn, and there's actually an institute that has all these amazing sources about those periods. And so when I was doing research on the book, I learned a lot.
昔の女性300年前1000年前の女性は現代の女性よりもっと抑圧されていると思い込んでいたんですけれど、それが案外そうじゃなかったんですよね。
I'd always assumed that women of 300 years ago and 1,000 years ago would be much more oppressed than women are today, but that wasn't necessarily the case.
社会の表には男性がしか出ていませんが、そうではない場所で女性が非常に自由に職業的にも自由に振る舞えて非常によく仕事ができるっていうそういうシステムもあった。それは江戸時代も、平安時代もあったっていうことに反対に羨ましくなったりしました。
So of course, back then it seemed like on the public life, men would be the one who had all the power. But actually, behind the scenes, women had a lot more freedom in the way that they acted, the way they behaved, even the way they worked. And so I was kind of envious of the women at the time.
だから私自身が希望を得たというところもありましたね、書いてみて。
So in a way, the process of writing gave me hope as well.
By the way, of course, this book isn't coming out for 2 more months, but you can get a taste of it in the most recent copy of Monkey. There's a section from the novel that we put in there, and we called it Yoshiwara Dreaming. Yoshiwara was one of the most famous pleasure quarters of the Edo period, and so you can get a sense for it there. And it shows on the first occasion of this unhappy wife entering into another woman's world through dream, and becoming that woman and sharing experiences with that woman. Okay, so we'll have question and answer a little bit later, but first we thought we'd like to entertain you with one of the stories from people from my neighborhood. They're good for this purpose because they're so short. And the one we're going to read is the Hachiro Lottery, and Hiromi will read in Japanese a section, and then I'll follow that up with my translation.
Are you reading the whole thing, or?
I think so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
いやでもだからどこで切るか。
あ、そうかそうか。
いやじゃあ段落ごとにしたらいい。
じゃあ私が読んで
あ、そうですね。そうだね。
八郎版は2回回ってきた。1回目は私が4歳の時、2回目は小学3年生の時である。八郎版はくじで決まる。だから1回も当たらない家もあるし、運が悪くて何回か回ってきてしまう家もある。外れを1等たくさん引いたのは確かかなえちゃんの3軒置いて隣の川又さんのところで、全部で11回も八郎版をさせられたと聞く。
The Hachiro, excuse me. The Hachiro Lottery. My family lost the Hachiro Lottery twice. The first time was when I was 4 years old. The second was when I was in the 3rd grade. The lottery loser was determined by a random draw. That meant there were some families that never lost, and other unlucky families that lost a number of times. The worst case was the Kawamata family, 2 doors down from Kanae's, who lost the lottery on 11 separate occasions.
八郎版の期間は1回につき3ヶ月だ。その間、八郎を家に住まわせ、食事を与え、学校にきちんと通わせなければならない。子供が普通にする手伝いくらいならさせてもいいけれど、学校を休んで働かせたり、夜遅くまで用事を言いつけたりしてはいけないことになっている。小遣いもやらなければならない。八郎は大ぐらいなので、八郎一人が来ただけで、その家の食費はひどくかさむ。素行が悪いので、先生からしょっちゅう呼び出しを受けたり、始末書を書かされたりもする。その上、八郎は弁が立つ。
Each loss was good for 3 months. Hachiro would live in your home during that time, and it was your family's responsibility to feed him and make sure he attended school regularly. You were allowed to ask him to perform normal chores, but not to keep him after school to work, nor to demand that he run errands late at night. He was also to be paid an allowance. Hachiro was a big eater whose presence caused the family's food bill to shoot through the roof. He was a troublemaker too, which meant that those looking after him were often called in for teachers' meetings, after which they had to write formal letters to apologize for whatever rules he had broken.
何かというと理屈をこね、口答えをし、いちゃま音つけ、うるさくやいの言う。いつかラーメン五郎が八郎版に当たった時など、親父さんがノイローゼになってしまい、しばらくは餃子がメニューから消えてしまったくらいだ。お前のところの餃子は味がなっていないと八郎が毎日責め立てたのである。
If you said anything, Hachiro always had a ready tongue. If you said anything at all critical to him, he flared up, talking back, griping, even making false accusations. For example, not long after the family that ran Damen 5, the noodle restaurant, lost the lottery, dumplings temporarily disappeared from the menu. Hachiro's constant complaints about how horrid they were had driven the owner around the bend.
八郎は敷島家の15番目の子供である。女が7人に男が8人の一番末の子が八郎なのである。子供が多すぎて敷島家では育てきれなくなったので、町内の家が順繰りに八郎を居候させることになったのだ。
Hachiro was the 15th child born to a family called the Shikishimas. They had 7 girls and 8 boys, of whom Hachiro, literally number 8, was the youngest. It was because the Shikishimas were unable to look after so many children that it was decided that Hachiro should rotate among the families in the neighborhood.
八郎の悪いところばかりを言い立てたけれど、いいところも少しはある。ハーブを育てるのがうまいのと、掘り物が得意なところである。行く先々の家で八郎がハーブを植えては育てるので、八郎番をしたことのある家の庭にはマロウやセボリーやオリジやヒソップがわんさか生えている。どうやって利用すればいいのか誰も知らないので、ただ判をしているだけだ。彫り物はとても精巧な心臓の形の彫刻を作ることができる。敷島家に伝わる技術らしい。気持ち悪いので誰も飾らない。
I've been listing Hachiro's defects, but he had his good points too. For one thing, he had a green thumb when it came to growing herbs. For another, he had a gift for a certain kind of sculpture. Huge clumps of mallow, savory, borage, peppermint willow, and other exotic herbs, planted and tended by Hachiro's own hands, filled the gardens of all the houses he had lived in. Since no one knew how to cook with them, though, they were left to go wild. As for sculpture, well, Hachiro was able to turn out exquisitely detailed models of the human heart. This was apparently a Shikishima family tradition. They looked so gross, though, that people kept them out of sight.
うちの2回目の八郎番の時には八郎は中学生だった。お風呂に入っていると必ず覗くし、宿題がわからないと言っては小学生の私に聞きに来るし、迷惑この上なかったけれど、外で会った時にはたまにアイスをおごってくれた。
The second time Hachiro stayed in our home, he was in junior high. He was a terrible pain in the neck, peeking at me whenever I took a bath and pestering me, a mere third grader, to help him with his homework. But every once in a while we'd meet outside the house and he'd treat me to ice cream.
八郎番は八郎が中学を卒業するまで町内の持ち回りで続いた。中学を卒業した八郎は工務店に勤めながら夜間高校に通った。大学にも進み、建築士の資格を取って独立し、八郎番をした家の改築や建て直しを随分と安く請け負った。八郎の工務店が請け負った家はすぐにわかる。必ず壁や塀のどこかに刻銘でリアルな心臓が彫ってあるからである。いくら料金を割引にしてくれても、あの心臓が嫌だと言って八郎を避ける家も多い。八郎はそういう時、ものすごく怒って、その家の裏庭にこっそり大量の飲み取り菊を植え付けてしまう。飲み取り菊は虫よけになるひどく臭いハーブである。
You could always tell which families had taken Hachiro up on his offer. The giveaway was that somewhere on their walls or fence there would be a heart sculpted in realistic detail. Families turned off by this idea would avoid him, however cheap his price. This so infuriated Hachiro that he began sneaking into their gardens to plant large quantities of flea-killing chrysanthemum. Apart from its insecticidal properties, this plant is known for its terrible stench. That's the end. So we have time for questions now, if you'd like.
Yeah, in the middle. Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming. One of my favorite stories is Record of the Night to Grief. I think you have such a, I just adore your skill for kind of capturing and conveying the internal logic of dreams. So my question is, are those based on your dreams or what inspired you to write some series of kind of escapades?
人の夢の話を聞くほどつまらないことはないって言いますよね。
So So there's the saying that nothing is more boring than hearing about people's dreams.
で私自身も自分の夢の話を自分のパートナーにしても全然聞いてもらえません。
So every time I try to tell my partner about the dreams that I had, he never listens to me.
ですからやっぱりあれは夢の話と言いながら純粋な創作です。
So it takes the story takes the shape of dreams, but it's complete fiction.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. Ted, I'm curious about the translation process. While you're translating Kawakami-san's work, what kind of exchange is there? Is there conversation? What kind of back and forth is there? And how does that affect the final product?
That's a good question. In this case, I've gotten to know Hiromi over the years, and I'm also able to rely on Moto if I have problems understanding a particular word or situation. So I don't have to ask many questions to Hiromi. Yeah. I mean, different translators handle that situation differently. In this case, I've always kind of you don't want to. You realize that the writer is writing new stuff, right? They're involved, engaged, focused on whatever it is that they're presently involved in, and you don't want to disrupt their concentration by bringing them back to something they wrote previously, and trying to pinpoint. And you can never ask them what anything means, right? That's generally true in any language. So that means you're more or less left on your own resources. But you have the text, and her texts are extremely compelling. And I don't feel the need to ask her lots of questions.
ありがとう。でも六郎と八郎の違いみたいなことを教えてくれていいの。
Thank you, but if you're ever puzzled about the Rokuro Hachiro situation, you can always ask me.
So, Hiromi, we New Yorkers would like to know what your plans are in our city.
今回は4日しかニューヨークにいないので、私にできることは皆さんとこうやって対話すること。自分の住んでいるのではない場所に行くとき、私は一番最初に行くのはスーパーマーケットです。それからもしできたらそこに住んでいる人と生活している人と普通の日常会話を交わしたいです。ですからこうやって質問をしてもらうっていうのは日常会話ではないけれど一番ニューヨークを知ることになると思うのですごくここに来られて嬉しいです。
So this time I only have 4 days in New York, and so connecting with you like this is the biggest event for me. Whenever I go outside of my home, my city, my country, the first thing I do is go to the supermarket. And I love having very ordinary conversations with people that are living there. And I think for this trip, having conversations with you like this is the best that I could hope for.
Tell us a little bit about your writing routine, and whether you have like a fixed routine.
私は非常に規則正しく生活していて朝10時から5時までお昼ご飯は食べるんですけどその間書くということを習慣にしています。
So I live a very systematic lifestyle. I work from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. with a lunch break in between, and I'm writing during that time.
でもその間ずっと書いていることは不可能で実はその間の2時間ぐらいしか実質書いていなくてあとはパソコンでソリティアをやっていたりなんか漫画を読み始めたりはしているんですが実はそれも書くことに非常に必要なことなんです。
Of course, I'm not writing all of those hours. I probably write about 2 hours total, and during the other many hours that I'm sitting on my desk, I'm doing solitaire on my computer or I'm reading manga. But that's actually a very necessary process, a very important writing process for me.
Additionally, do you listen to music when you write?
書いてる時は聞きません。
No, not at all when I'm writing.
音楽は豊かすぎて もうそっちに心がいってしまうので書けなくなります。
For me, music is so rich that if I'm listening to music, that's where my heart goes. So.
Yeah, in Monkey, we now have a regular feature in which we ask a number of translators questions like that. And I think the music question was in the last issue,
This
wasn't
is a
it?
music issue.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see the great variety of answers that we got from translators in their relationship to music and translation.
Yes.
You mentioned that when you wrote Dragon Palace, literature written by women was still seen with a hard to talk about some things. Could you elaborate a little bit about how that has changed? How do you feel that is different now? Seen from the outside, we see so many more writers, women writers, but I wonder how it seems from inside.
ちょうど私が小説を書いて発表し始めた頃はまだ日本には大きい賞があって芥川賞と直木賞というのがあって、それが両方女性が受賞したのは私の時が初めてだったんです。
So when I first started writing, there are two major prizes in Japan: Akutagawa Prize and the Naoki Prize. And I was the year that I won the Akutagawa Prize was the first year that women won both of those prizes.
ところが今は私は芥川賞の選考委員をしているんですけれども、1年前には芥川賞は5人ぐらい候補がいて、直木賞も5人ぐらい候補がいるんですけど、その全員が女性でした。
So now I'm on the committee side. I decide who I'm on the committee that decides who the winner will be. And last year, there's usually 5 final candidates for the prize, and all 5 were women.
ですからちょうど私が書き始めた頃はまだまだ女性は少なかった。ですから女性の作家が作家として扱われていなくて、もっと昔の私より何十年前の女性作家たちが女流文学会という互助団体を作っていました。
So when I was starting to write, there were not as many women just in terms of numbers, and several decades before that, there was even a group called the Women Writers Society, Joryu Bungaku. So kind of not just women writers, but women style writers, right? There's expectation of the type of writing there was, and so there were so few that there had to be kind of a society of writers like that.
けれど私が書き始めてから15年後ぐらいにその団体は解散しました。必要がなくなって。
But about 15 years after I started writing, that group no longer it got disbanded because it was no longer necessary to have that kind of grouping, gender grouping.
ですから小説家は男女の比は非常にバランスが取れています。日本は男女比がバランスが取れていなくて、世界で123位という低い、女性が例えば政府にも少ない、いろいろな会社の偉い人にも少ないっていう非常に遅れた国ですが、小説家に関しては女性は幸い今非常に対等ですが、しかし編集者はまだまだ女性は多いんですが、会社の中のトップまで行く女性は少ないです。これからですね。
So, Japan is a very unequal society when it comes to gender. I think in the gender gap scale, Japan is maybe 123rd, down the list. But in terms of literature, I would say it's quite well balanced at this point. But the editors in the publishing industry, there's still a imbalance. There are a lot of female editors these days, but not so many go to the top level, the managerial level.
Are there any more questions? Yes.
So I really enjoyed your collection, People from My Neighborhood. I was wondering whether parts of the fantastical aspect of the book was inspired by your daily conversations or just interactions with other people, things like that.
その通りです。中でもスナック愛のおばさんというのがいまして、そのスナックは私が奈良に 旅行に行った時に駅前にあったスナックがモデルです。冷凍食品しかありませんでした。
Yeah, so I do draw inspiration for my everyday life. Actually, there's an episode about a snack eye. There's a woman in the snack eye. That was directly inspired by a trip that I took to Nara. There was a snack bar right in front of the station. It was a kind of bar that would only serve frozen foods. Yeah.
とても好きなスナックでした。
I really like that snack bar.
In the back.
I'm wondering, since the gender issue came up, so Kawakami-san, your writes about the whole imaginative world, so that actually makes it easier to write like a cross-gender relationship or going over the like define gender or sexual relationship to identity. But you also wrote about the genetically male boy going to high school dressing as a girl uniform. Possibly that was received do you feel like the whole society changing? Is it easier to bring that into the more realistic novel? Or like, how do you define going between those realistic novel, fantastic novel, fantastic?
今小説の世界の中では本当は書くのが難しいことはあんまりないと私は思っています。それはもしかすると私が竜宮の中の偶話的な形で書くのが一番適していたと言いましたが、それは自分にとってであって全ての小説家にとってではない。小説は非常に自由なものです。形が決まっていないというのが小説の一番いいところだからさっき言ったのは私の場合、小説全体ではない、私の場合はということです。
Yeah, so I think with novel writing, it's actually quite free. There are not many things that I can't write about. Sometimes they take the shape of allegory, for example, with the Dragon Palace, and that's very personally for me. I found it the best to write in that mode. But I think other people would, just as easily write about something like that in a very different mode. So I think the best thing about the novel is that it's a very free form. That it can be adapted. Yes.
反対に言うと読者もどんな風に読んでもいいと私は思っています。私が伝えたいことがあるのではなく、もう私の手を離れたら読者は自分のものにしてください、小説を。
And I also feel the same about the readers too. The readers can just interpret and read the way that they want to read the book. So once I have no agenda in writing my work, and so once it's left my hands, I would like the reader to take the freedom to read them as they want.
それが小説の一番いいところじゃないかなと思います。私はこういう気持ちで書いた。でも読者は私の気持ちを考えることはない。もう自分の気持ちのままに読んでほしい。それが生きる喜びだと思っています。
Yeah, so I think that's the best thing about fiction. I have my own emotions when I'm writing them. The reader has their own emotions when they're reading, and I think that's the joy of writing and reading fiction.
Well, I think that's a perfect spot to wrap this up. But we have, I need to thank people. We need to thank people. Need to thank the people at Kinokuniya very much. And we have received wonderful support from the Japan Foundation and from Koji and I in Tokyo. And can you think of anyone else we need to thank?
Everyone here.
Everyone here, okay. And we have a number of books behind us. We'll move the chairs away in both Japanese and English, written by Hiromi. And so please come up and take a look and buy them if you can. Thank you.
Can you introduce the issues of Monkey?
Yeah.
We have 4 issues of Monkey. This is the first issue, and each issue has a feature. Okay, the food issue. The first one, food, and the second one is travels, and this one crossings between cultures, between languages, between everything, and this is the latest issue, the music issue. And the short poem I read in the beginning is also in this issue. And we of course have Dragon Palace, and there are a number of Hiromi's books in Japanese also. Okay. Oh, I see. These are all books of hers that have been translated into English. Hi. Anything else?
Big hands.
Okay. Thank you very much.